I want to associate myself with my colleagues' comments of concern about the cuts in so many social programs. It's why I oppose this budget. But given that I'm the last person to ask questions, I don't want to cover ground that has already been covered. And so I want to bring up two different issues. First, in the interest of proving that Democrats can say something nice when we do agree with a policy perspective, I want to commend you for supporting the Will Hurd, Robin Kelly bill on modernizing government technology. It's $210 million to help make the government better with the internet and technology, and I think that's common sense. I really hope the Appropriations Committee will fund that bipartisan effort, and I appreciate that being part of the budget. My question is a more philosophical question, because I don't think there's a person on this committee who doesn't believe or doesn't want America to succeed and outstrip China and be the dominant economy in the 21st century. Now, I read a report a few days ago by Bain. You can't accuse Bain of being like the New York Times or CNN or biased. I mean, you know, Mitt Romney worked there. And here's what Bain's report said. Bain's report said, basically, we're going through a technology revolution similar to the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution took 40 years. The transition from manufacturing to services took 20 years. This technology revolution is probably going to take 10 years. It's going to displace potentially 20% of workers. And they said that the biggest challenge to America's economic growth is actually income inequality, because there may not be enough people with money to buy things. Now, we know China has their problem. China doesn't care about the consumer welfare of their individuals. It's all an export-driven economy. The success of our country has been a strong middle class that buys things, not just from a perspective of fairness, from an actual perspective of economic growth and making sure we outstrip China in the 21st century. So I guess my question is simple, and it's really not partisan, but do you see the world from a similar lens, that we have to tackle income inequality and care about the growth of the middle class if we care about America's success?
I'll surprise you and say that we do, and I think many in my party do. I think one of the places, though, philosophically where we start to vary is how to remedy the situation. There's many folks in your party, if you writ large, who would say, well, the way to solve that gap is to have government get involved to redistribute wealth. Folks on this side of the aisle would say, no, the best way to do it is to allow folks to lift themselves up out of poverty to close the gap. I've always contended that people really don't care much about how much other people make. They care a lot more about how much they make. And it's not income inequality that I care about as much as it is my own income. And if I feel like I'm able to provide for my family, I'm able to provide my children with what I want to give them, that I'm happy. I don't care that you make 10 times or 100 times what I do. I would point out on the Bain thing, I haven't seen that, but I've seen similar reports. I'd encourage you to, and again, I know it was a philosophical question, I'll draw it back to the budget very quickly. Displacement doesn't always mean unemployment. It never has. When cars displaced the horse and buggy, all it did was create new opportunities at higher paying jobs. That's why it's so critical, obviously, to have education as part of this. I know we've taken some criticisms today from your side of the aisle regarding some of the proposals on education. What's not been mentioned is the doubling of the commitment we make to apprenticeship programs, because we have proof that they work. A classic example is trade adjustment assistance, which the data actually suggests if you go through that federal program, you are worse off than not having gone through it. But if you go through an apprenticeship program, you're actually much better off. So we move money around in order to fund those types of things. So I would agree with you philosophically. Would look forward to working with you on ways that maybe we can work together to accomplish that same end.
Well, I appreciate the acknowledgement on income inequality, and I agree with you that new jobs are going to be created, and Bain says that. The challenge is it took 40 years from the transition when we went from agriculture to industrialization, and the question is, how long is it going to take for these new jobs, and what are we going to do on the transition? But my hope would be, given the recognition in income inequality, maybe there are productive investments, whether it's in technology credentialing, whether it's in public colleges, universities, expanding access to the internet, that people on both sides could come together on to say, look, we got to do this because this is what's going to make America competitive in the 21st century. And I hope sometime in the next year or few years we can actually start working on some of that in a bipartisan basis.